Well, good morning, everybody. It's my great pleasure to thank UGG for being the presenting sponsor of the festival and to the board of directors of the film festival as well. Thank you very much to them. You're in for an amazing treat this morning, the producers panel. And without further ado, let me introduce Pippa Harris, producer of 1917. David Heyman, producer of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Marriage Story. Andrew Miano, The Farewell. Carthew Neal, Jojo Rabbit. Kwak Sing Nay, Parasite. And Emma Tillinger Koskoff, producer of Joker and The Irishman. And please welcome the moderator, a great friend of the festival, Glenn Whipp. He's the columnist for Los Angeles Times.
Good morning. How many of you were here last year? Yeah, when we had the 101 freeway washout, and it was a shortened panel. Three producers, I think, made it here, and you knew one of those producers was going to end up winning the Oscar for Best Picture, because if they could make it here with the freeway washed out, they were definitely a great producer. So here we are. Let's look at, we have some little package of footage, clips, memorable moments from the movies that we're going to be talking about today. So let's take a look. It's been a great year for movies. Just watching this again, watching these clips, yeah, what a year for movies. Let's talk. We'll get to know our panelists a little bit. We'll ask some more general. You've been here before. You know what we're going to do. So, Pippa, congratulations. Producers Guild Awards were last night. 1917 named Best Picture. And you had 2 hours of sleep.
Yep.
Celebrating, and here you are this morning.
Bright as a daisy this morning,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. When you look at this movie, this looks like a hell of a produced movie. The construction of the film, it's constructed to look like it's one single take, which means that there's two things that as a producer you're doing. One, you're trying to keep the movie on time, and that's one thing. So you're trying to keep the movie on time, and yet if you're making a movie that looks like it's one single take, you have to have some issues of continuity come up. What was involved in that?
Well, a lot. So we shot across 65 days, but obviously in the film it needs to look as though it's only one condensed time period in the same location. So in terms of lighting, in terms of geography, it all had to feel of a piece, and the locations were scattered across the UK, from Scotland down to the south of England, and obviously they had to be stitched together so that they read as though these boys could really have taken that journey. So at various points they were going from Glasgow down to Wiltshire, back to Oxfordshire, over to Shepperton, and I hope it all feels as though it's conceivably happened in the same place. And if you can imagine the lighting of it was the biggest challenge, really, because on day one, we got up quite early and Roger Deakins said, we're not going to be filming today, just thought you'd like to know. And I said, oh no, Roger, don't be ridiculous, of course we'll film. it was bright sunshine, and he said, yeah, but it's too bright, we can't shoot in this. And as the day wore on, we kept looking at each other, and we were rehearsing the whole time, but he said, we're not going to turn over. And by about 5 o'clock, the studio execs phoned and said, look, I know it's your first day, but really you ought to have emailed when you turned over this morning. And I went, yeah, no, we haven't turned over yet. So, but it was just a very odd rhythm of production, because we would, as we did on the first day, we would sort of get behind ourselves, and then we'd rehearse, and then the next day we shot both the Monday's work and the Tuesday's work, and then got ahead on the Wednesday's work. So by Wednesday we were ahead of ourselves. So it was a sort of really odd rhythm, and that took a while to get used to, and not to panic, frankly, because, of course, as a producer, you're always panicking when you haven't completed the day's work. You think this is a disaster and we're going to, go massively over budget. And by the end, we actually came in under schedule, because we sort of got into the rhythm of it and caught up with ourselves. But that had its own problems, because then we needed to move locations, and the locations we needed to go to, the production design department hadn't finished building, so it was a complicated thing.
Yeah, I mean, it looks you watch this movie, it looks like a complicated thing. I mean, even just the opening 10 minutes, you're going through the trenches. I mean, somebody had to, those are not digitally created.
I dug all the trenches myself. Dennis Gassner makes that, he did it. No. So all of the trenches, we dug about a mile, just over a mile, and a bit of trenches, some in north of London, some mainly down on Salisbury Plain, which is in Wiltshire. And the difficulty was that because it was all being shot as a continuous take, we were never going to be able to cut away to shorten scenes. So we had to kind of march out each scene, first of all using cardboard boxes back at Shepperton, and then on the real locations with these kind of flags. We'd sort of plant flags when we got to the end of a bit of trench and we were going to turn a corner. And then they would start digging, and occasionally, of course, after they dug, Sam would say, oh, do you know what, I think that scene's a little bit short, and can you just get them to dig another 400 yards of trench? You think, oh no. So it was a kind of constantly evolving production design, I would say.
And one of the areas where you're digging, it was owned by the Ministry of Defense.
Yeah.
And it was like a place where there was archaeological interest. There was rare wildlife. I mean, these are all things, as a producer, you have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, it had, the MOD, on the one hand, are great, because they, frankly, they've been firing live rounds into this landscape for many years. So, the fact we were going in with a couple of diggers was the least of the landscape's problems. But they also were rather alarmingly doing live exercises while we were filming. So occasionally you'd hear this sort of boom in the background, and you think, that's not one of our booms, that's somebody shooting a cannon sort of over there somewhere.
But that just adds to the tension of the film, right?
Yeah, it did. And the other thing that happened down there on the military land is we built that barn that's in the clip. So we built a French farmhouse and a barn, and I think they look quite realistic. And we got to the end of the shoot, and the ecological expert came to me and said, "Oh, I'm afraid you've got nesting swallows in the barn, so you can't strike the set." And I said, "Oh, okay. So how long does that last then?" And he said, "Well, they've laid their eggs, so you've got to wait for them to hatch and fledge, and then you can strike your set." Okay, so that's like 6 weeks, and so we had to keep the set up, and then on the last day we sort of went in with our, hammers to knock the whole thing down, and another pair of birds had nested, so we had to start all over again. So I think the locals thought we were just going to leave the buildings there, because after 12 weeks they were still sitting there empty, but finally the birds went away. It's a happy story.
I kind of feel like they should have kept that structure, and there should be like some kind of 1917 tour, you know, and you can go through the trenches. But you had to fill in all those trenches, right?
No, we had to put everything back, and I'm sure it's the same here. You know, you have to be really careful with soil, so we had to separate out all the substratas of the different types of soils so that you didn't muddle up topsoil with the lower down strata, and that all had to be checked so that when we were putting it back in the right order, and
wow.
it was quite a nightmare. I didn't have to do that bit.
So you talked about the first day with and it was the sunshine was too bright.
Too bright.
And then, I mean, we're going to be careful on spoilers here because the movie just came out, in wide release. It was
last weekend.
God, it feels like about a month ago, doesn't it? No, okay, so yeah, but there are very complicated shots in this movie. There's one, and there's a lot of extras. I mean, there's one scene where the main character has to run, you know, and there's like 500 extras about to go into battle. And you've got a limited amount of time to execute that shot. Talk to me, you know, just
about the level of stress.
The
quite
level
high,
of stress,
quite
and
high.
just in a general sense, like, I mean,
Yeah,
what's that
no,
like?
Well, when I look back at it now, I just think, why on earth do we ever agree to do this? But at the time, it sort of didn't feel quite as daunting, and so we had brilliant special effects guys who dug pits in which we had the explosives that went off, and but obviously we could only have so many of those pits, so we only had 8. So we knew that if we went past 8 takes, we were going to have to redo the whole thing and get all the extras back again and everything. And I think it was on the second take, the extras all piled over. They were all really like gung-ho young men who'd been drilled by our army consultants. So they were all desperate to do their bit and charge over the front line. And George, the central character who plays Schofield, was doing his run, and obviously we were filming him. And as these extras came over, one of them just took him out like a rugby tackle, and he went flying. And then he sort of picked himself up and, you know, carried on running. And then another one did the same thing. And Sam and I were just thinking, oh no! And then, of course, when we look back at it, you think, actually, that kind of looks quite good. You know, we could never have choreographed it. It was just a complete fluke, and a real fluke that nobody actually broke anything, because it looks quite dangerous. But also we had this whole thing where the camera was being moved off, it was on a crane at the start of the shot, and then it went onto a vehicle. So the grips had to unhook it off the crane and put it onto the vehicle. And so they had to be in shot. So they're all dressed as extras. So I can see them in the shot. And then they sort of pelt out of the way, and the camera goes back again. And then it has to be unhooked and then put back on a different crane. So it was the whole thing was really complicated to choreograph. But in the end, it worked, I think.
I love that story so much, because when you're watching the film and you're getting toward the end, you have such an investment in this young man, and he's making this run, and he gets knocked down, and as he would.
Yeah.
I mean, but you're just saying, wasn't planned.
No, it wasn't planned. And of course, actually, you're right. You know, logically, of course he'd get knocked down. You'd never be able to run through a group of 500 people and not get knocked down. So probably, you know, we should have tried to choreograph it, but it would have been impossible, I think. So it was a happy accident.
Emma, so I think we were talking before, and we're not sure. Emma and David both nominated for 2 films this year, and I think that's only happened. It's only happened 4 other times or 5 other times in the history of the Academy Awards, the 92-year history of the Academy Awards. And only, Emma, you're the second woman to have 2 movies nominated in the same year. mean, your story, you started working with Martin Scorsese as a production assistant, right?
Yes. Well,
And then-
like an executive assistant.
Executive assistant. And then like 4 years later, you're running his production company?
Yeah.
That's a nice ascent. Talk a little about about that.
Well, to be fair, at the time that I went to work for Marty, I was sort of already on a producing trajectory with Ted Demme, who I worked with for several years before he tragically passed away. But so I took a year off after that and moved back to New York, and you know, a year later went to work for Marty. So I was sort of, and I wasn't ready to. I wanted to be back in an assistant position, just sort of getting my feet wet again. So so we just worked for 4 years together, and he needed a producer, and I was sort of ready to be groomed, and I've been very, very fortunate to have been raised by him in this business, and he's sort of taught me everything I know, and it's like my own private film school. So I'm very lucky. So that's how that came about.
He says if you want to make something happen in New York, you are the person to go to. Like if you need something, if you need to get through the red tape, talk to him.
I've kind of been dubbed this New York,
Right.
the New York, the girl to go to for New York movies. Working with Marty in New York, and working with our crews, and the bureaucracy, and New York's an incredible city to shoot in. It's very, very challenging though, and you really need to have a lot of different people on your side there. So I've cultivated many relationships there, and I can sort of, Todd Phillips likes to call me the gangster of New York, because I can lean in on people and sort of get what we need, and I can, so.
So if I ever needed like a dinner reservation or...
I'm your girl,
Yeah.
You ever
good.
need help with the MTA? I got the girl.
I mean, almost as long as you've been working with him, Irishman goes back almost that far, doesn't it?
Yeah, it goes back a long time, 12 years.
Yeah. And I mean, the question was just who's going to step up and give the budget for this? I read a quote from you where you said that Paramount at one point offered $25 million.
Total.
Total. Yes.
Yeah.
And this movie cost a little bit more than that.
A little bit more than that, yeah. Look, I think, it took a long time to make. Also, Marty's schedule. There were other factors for sure, but had it not been for Netflix coming in when they came in, and all the schedules aligning, The Irishman would never have seen the light of day. Never. It could never have been made anywhere but Netflix. So we are eternally grateful to them for stepping up and being incredible partners, and really taking the risk, the visual effects risk with us, and they've been incredible.
It's interesting to think about, though, in terms of the timing, because, and I think all you, everyone up here can speak to this a bit. Sometimes movies land when they're supposed to land.
Absolutely.
And I feel like for the Irishman and Martin Scorsese at this point in his life and this point in his career, this was the time for him to make this movie that's kind of a summation about so many things that he's dwelt on in his movies.
Yeah, and he would echo all of that too if he were here. It was a confluence of schedule, budget, all that, but yes, the real time in his life and Bob's life, and bringing Joe and Al together. Yeah, it really was sort of the culmination of those films that they've done together, and the themes that he's delved into over the years. So yeah,
but don't you guys feel that way? Like sometimes, I mean, the movies are hard to make. And they a lot of times just take years and years and years. Don't you feel like? But then when they, I mean, don't you guys feel that way? Like the timing sometimes
Yes.
is just like perfect? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you have another movie, Emma,
I do.
nominated.
I do.
Joker, which God, that clip was. I mean, the thing with Joker was that there was a lot written about Joker before it came out.
Yeah.
There was a fear among many people, or some people. Let's not maybe overstate it, that the movie might incite violence.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing the film at the Toronto Film Festival, and I heard about the party afterward, where a couple journalists went up to Warner Brothers execs and went, you know, you're not being responsible
Right.
by releasing this movie. What was that like as a producer, as you're leading up to the release of your film?
Yeah, you know, it was very nerve-wracking, bit of a nail-biter. You know, we didn't set out to make an irresponsible movie, and you know, we set out to make, you know, do a character study, and really shed light on, you know, mental illness, you know, all the themes that are covered in the film. But, you know, Todd, certainly we made a provocative film, and I think he made an important film, but it was never meant to be seen as making something irresponsible or, yeah, so it was troubling, and I think that, you know, the speculation before people had really had the chance to see it, but once people got to see it and sort of make up their own mind, I feel like audiences really embraced it and sort of saw what we were going for.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was nerve-wracking for sure, and at one point I thought to myself, oh my God, this movie might not see the light of day. Could this movie not see the light of day? Is Warner Brothers going to shy away from it? Are they going to pull it? Like, you know, there was a moment there, but, you know, I really commend Warner Brothers for taking the chance on the film and sticking with it and championing it and believing in it.
Was there ever any meetings with Warner Brothers at that time, like in late September or October? Like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, not that I was directly involved with. I'm certain that there was. You know, it's Warner Brothers, it's AT&T now. Certainly, I'm sure there was damage control of some kind going on, but nothing that came to me. I don't think it had reached like that kind of a crisis.
Yeah, yeah. I don't remember how. I mean, I know the movie opened quite well, quite big.
Yeah.
I know it's made grossed more than $1 billion
Yes.
worldwide.
For all aspiring producers, make sure you get a good back end always, because I didn't. I should have.
So how did you spend that? You know, so you're talking about being, you know, that nerve-wracking lead up. How did you spend the opening weekend then?
Like in complete and utter disbelief and shock and cheering and like, you know, just so. I love this movie. This movie's near and dear to me. I'm full of pride and so proud of this movie. And every weekend as I watch it and the re-releases, you know, I'm amazed and inspired by it too.
Yeah, I should note that 11 Oscar nominations. I mean, just all across. Categories.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of support from every branch of the Academy in terms of people looking at the craft of this movie and appreciating it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Parasite.
Yay.
What a. Is this your first feature film credit, first producing?
아니요, 두 번째 작품입니다.
No, it's her second.
So, okay, the first one was it a feature or was it a short film?
장편 영화 극장 개봉 거죠.
It's a feature.
Okay. How did you get involved? I mean, so second credit, and here you are. How did you get involved with the movie with Bong Joon-ho?
나봉주랑 어떻게 만났냐고. 제가 그러니까 제작자로서는 두 번째 작품이지만 한 26년 전에 그 키노라는 영화 잡지의 기자였어요. 그때부터 영화를 시작한 건데 그때 저희 잡지는 단편을 찍은 봉준호의 팬이었고 봉준호는 이 영화를 되게 진지하게 다루는 이 유일한 매체의 팬이었어요. 그때부터 서로 알고 지내는 사이였어요. 네.
So it's only only my second feature, but I've worked in the film industry for 26 years, and I actually started off as a reporter for a film magazine called Keynote. And at the time, director Bong was a fan of the magazine, and I was a fan of his short films, so that's where our relationship began.
So all the way back to your days as a journalist, covering his work.
그러니까 그 영화 아카데미 영화 교육 기관의 졸업 작품인 단편 영화가 이미 그때부터 굉장히 영화를 보는 사람들 사이에서는 인기가 있었고 화제가 됐었어요.
His graduation piece at the time was already very talked about, and people paid attention to him even when he was in film school.
그리고 그가 저와 한 살 차이 나는데요. 저보다 한 살 어린데 거의 같은 세대잖아요.
He's only 1 year younger than me, so we're from the same generation.
그래서 같은 세대로서 한국 영화계에 비슷한 시기를 살아가고 생각이 비슷한 사람으로서 한 20년을 같이 친하게, 그러니까 알고 지내온 사이였던 거죠. 네.
From the same generation, we went through the film industry together from the same perspective for 20 years.
그랬다가 저희 제작사가 원래 마더를 만든 제작사예요.
Our production company is responsible for his film Mother.
그때 저는 제작자는 아니었고, 네.
I wasn't the producer at the time, but I was working for the company.
네, 그래서 본인이 두 작품 설국열차랑 옥자를 이제 그 외국에서 찍고 그러고 나서 순수하게 한국 언어, 한국 배우들로 이제 찍고자 하는 영화를 준비하면서 저희 회사와 저한테 이제 같이 해보지 않겠냐라고 제안을 한 거죠.
After director Bong shot Snowpiercer and Okja, he wanted to return to Korea to do a pure Korean film in Korean language and with Korean actors. So that's when he came to me and said, let's work together.
그래서 그렇게 같이 하게 됐습니다.
That's how we came to work together.
What was so many six Oscar nominations, and maybe I'm happy about all of them. One of the ones that I was most excited about was the production design Oscar nomination, because the set of the house is just amazing in this movie. It's a character in this movie. Was making that one of the more challenging aspects of producing this film?
일단 시나리오에 쓰여져 있는 요건들에 다 맞는 집을 지어야 되었기 때문에 일단 설계 자체가 그러니까 한 업무가 있었고요. 그 다음에 그것을 정원까지 다 세트인 거는 아시는지 모르겠는데 정원까지 모두가 세트예요. 거기 화면에 나오는 모든 장면이 거기까지 일단 설명해주세요.
So it was very difficult to build a house that had all the qualities that were listed in the screenplay. And I'm not sure if you know this or not, but the garden is also still a set. So the whole house, the garden, everything was built.
근데 영화에 제일 많이 나오는 장소고 또 중요성이 워낙 컸기 때문에 이것은 그러니까 우리가 원하는 대로 완벽하게 짓고자 하는 그 목표가 있었습니다.
Because the house is the place that obviously you see the most in the film, and it has a lot of importance. We needed it to look perfect.
그래서 우리 미술 감독님과 굉장히 공을 들여서 그걸 준비를 했고요. 콘티를 짜기 위해서 그 설계를 베이스로 해서 그러니까 그 VFX 팀에서 만들어준 마치 게임에서 인물이 그 공간을 돌아다니면 그 공간이 앵글대로 보일 수 있는 그런 그 일종의 약간 게임 같은 프로그램을 만들어서 미리 보기도 했고요.
So Director Bong and the production designer really spent a lot of effort to build this house. The VFX team built a little game-like device for us so that it looked like we could kind of imagine it beforehand, what it would look like when we walk through the house.
그래서 실내에서 이렇게 돌아다니면 그 앵글들을 다 확인할 수 있는.
When you walked around with this device, you could see all the angles.
그렇게 해서 거의 이렇게 완벽한 계획을 세우고 완벽하게 만들었고 특히 부잣집이기 때문에 그 안에 들어가는 모든 그 말하자면 장식이라든가 가구라든가 이런 것들이 최고급 그러나 천박하지 않고 굉장히 그 주인공 박 사장님의 캐릭터를 잘 반영할 수 있는 고급품이어야 돼서 그 안에 들어간 물건들도 굉장히 공들여서 찾아서 넣었습니다.
So everything had to be perfect and according to plan in order to be shot perfectly. And as many of you know, the house is supposed to be the house of a very rich family. So all the props, all the furniture that went in had to be of the highest quality, and we wanted to make it in good taste.
그리고 혹시 그 부잣집 말고 그 가난한 집 동네 전체가 세트인 거는 알고 계시는지?
Do all of you know that not the rich family, but the poor family, their house and their whole neighborhood is also a set?
I love the reaction. That's why I was saying that production design nomination was so richly deserved.
그 저는 그 우리 프로덕션 디자인 이하준 감독이 한 그 미술 작업 중에서 그 반지하 세트에 대해서 정말 저도 경탄을 표하고 거기 정말 많은 공을 들인 거에 대해서 그러니까 실제로 그런 동네에 가서 가져온 물건들로 채우고 냄새까지도 다 그러니까 배우들이 그걸 느낄 수 있게 냄새와 벌레까지도 다 세팅이 된 그런 동네였거든요. 네네.
I really admire production designer Lee Ha-jun because he really put so much work into that half-basement apartment that the poor family lived in. He went to neighborhoods like that and brought items actually from those neighborhoods into the set. Not only that, he wanted it to smell like that kind of neighborhood. He brought bugs in, so he went all out.
That's great. As I mentioned, 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, but also including Best International Feature, the first South Korean film to ever be nominated for what's now called Best International Feature. Up until this year, it had been called Best Foreign Language Feature. What does that mean to finally break that barrier?
패러사이트가 작년 5월에 칸네에서 황금 종려상을 받았었어요.
Parasite won the Palme d'Or at Cannes Festival last May.
그것도 한국 영화라선 최초였거든요.
And that was the first for a Korean film as well.
그리고 지금 오스카에 6개 부분 노미네이트 된 것도 최초죠. 그러니까 한 부분도 노미네이트 된 적이 없었는데 한꺼번에 6부분에 노미네이트가 된 거죠.
A Korean film has never been nominated for an Oscar either, but we're nominated for 6 categories this year.
지금 저 그러니까 너무 신기하고 기쁜 그 개인적 감정이 있지만 본 감독님이나 저나 이 일이 뭐라 그러나 한국의 좋은 영화와 좋은 감독들에 대해서 이 북미의 팬들이 관심을 갖게 되는 계기 그것이 되는 것이 가장 기쁘다고 생각하고 있습니다.
Obviously, we're so happy and surprised at the nominations, but Director Bong and I, our bigger hope is that it kind of raises awareness and interest in foreign cinema and Korean films.
Thank you.
Carthew, Jojo Rabbit. We were talking before this, I interviewed Taika back in late August, and it was just so striking, Taika Waititi, writer-director of Jojo Rabbit, and plays Hitler.
He's got balls.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like he's telling me, okay, his mom was the one who found the book, and Caging Skies, and he was like, well, I really liked it, but I don't want to make just a conventional kind of Holocaust drama. So his decision to what he did was to add a funny Adolf Hitler, which, as you say, takes a certain amount of courage, doesn't it?
Especially as a Polynesian Jew, I think that takes extra courage.
But you've known him for quite some time. Talk a little about that, and as a producer, your job is to, and this was another movie that's been around for a few years, waiting for the right time. Yeah. Yeah,
if you know Taika and Taika's previous work, I think Jojo Rabbit isn't as surprising maybe as it sounds. But if you come to it having not known Taika's work, Taika often wants to, he often makes films about seeing the world through children's eyes and seeing the way children can be both very resilient in times of stress, but also how vulnerable they are. And I think, a big part of what he's trying to remind us in the film is, as adults, what sort of legacy are we sort of showing to our children in the way we behave? And that's been a theme throughout a lot of his work. He does it through comedy, and in the book is very different. It's a drama, but Jojo in the book is thinking about what Adolf would want for him, because he's at the start of the story. He's in love with the idea of being in Adolf's guard and wants to be the best kid in the Hitler Youth. And so Taika's way, obviously in a book you can write about what someone's thinking, but in a movie you have to find a way to externalize that, and this was his solution, was to create an imaginary friend. And he never intended to play that role himself, he says, but when I read the script, I could imagine him immediately, and I don't know if anyone else could have quite done that, the role in the way that he does, because he is a very playful, and he sees that he's a very playful character, and I think, he didn't enjoy doing it, and I think, but it was a decision he wanted to play that role because he felt, it was an important message, and also I think, by being a Polynesian, he wasn't the real, he wasn't playing the real Hitler. He didn't do any research on what Hitler was like. He was like Jojo's version, like a 10-year-old's version of what Adolf Hitler was, and a very confused version. So that was the character he was trying to play in the movie.
Yeah. It's a big swing. It's a big swing, a lot of the films that we're talking about today. And it's very tender at times. There's absurdist comedy going on. When he was shooting it, when you guys were shooting it, how many different approaches would he take to? How much time did you need to build into filming to kind of get maybe a range of performances?
Yeah, so the Taika script he'd written actually in 2010, and it went on the blacklist, and it was a much loved script, but I think no one was really prepared to back it back then. And as time went on, we were talking about the timing of films. As the world was sort of changing, I think it became more relevant, unfortunately, and made the film more viable when we started in 2017. And I think that yeah, he. I've forgotten the question.
It was just more like, okay, as you're shooting it, do you need to build it? Yeah.
Got ya. Okay, so the script was really good. That's what I was going to tell you guys. And he does write beautiful scripts. I also produced Hunt for the Water People with him, and the script also was able to ride the wave of that humor and the heart, and then the gut punches, and he surprises you. He's just kicked you in the guts when you're reading, and then a page later you're starting to giggle, and you shouldn't be, But that's sort of what life is like. You don't have a day where you're, it's your funny day, and then a day which is your serious day. Sometimes in the most serious moments you are laughing, and sometimes in the saddest moment. So I think he wanted to replicate that, but with that template, in the process of production, he likes to get a range of performances. He's not trying for one particular performance. He wants to, and especially with children, it's really difficult to get them to do exactly what you want. So it's a very playful environment, and the actors feel very relaxed. He has this sort of magic touch of being able to get the actors to feel very relaxed in those roles, and then it's the rewriting process, like all films, in the edit. But Taika it's especially important, I think, to get that tone right, and we do a lot of testing of the film. So we tested the film about 15 times, and sometimes that's with 10 people, sometimes that's with 100 or 200 people, but and Taika is always there sitting, and I think it's not necessarily the number, you get a lot of feedback sometimes in these test screenings, but it's actually Taika sitting in the room, and you can feel where a joke isn't working, or the drama isn't working, and you just keep adjusting that, and that's that's part of the process. So starting with a very strong script, and then being very playful in the capturing of that script, and then spending a lot of time massaging again to get that tone back.
Yeah. And you mentioned he often does films through children's perspective. It's hard to imagine. I mean, how did you find Roman Griffin Davis? Because the movie does not work. I mean, you're asking a lot.
Well, that clip that played
man.
Today, I've heard kids all over the world, over 1,000 kids, say that scene, and I'm only just starting to like it again, because that was our audition scene, and we were searching. Taika likes to work with children who haven't done much acting before. Roman had never been in anything before, so we did a lot of street casting. We were looking up and down the UK for our kid, and then we started looking out. As we got closer to production, we started looking in America and Canada. We actually thought, maybe we've had such luck in New Zealand before. Maybe we go back to New Zealand, Australia, and then 1 month out from production. We still didn't have our Jojo, who is the heart of the movie, and everyone else was turning up, and Roman just appeared out of nowhere, and he was actually here in America working with his dad, who was working here, and we came back and saw him, and he was incredible. He's a very warm, lovely kid, like the Jojo at the end of the film, and it was just so in the auditioning process, it was just seeing if he could get to the performance that was needed at the start, so then we could sort of unravel that across the film.
Nice. Andrew, I like listening to This American Life. I like that show. I mean, but I don't often listen and think, oh, that's going to be a movie. That could be a movie. That's where The Farewell came from, right?
Yes, and funnily enough, it was actually I want to say, third time we had tried with This American Life story to turn it into a film, but the first time that we were successful with it. And it basically, it was a Sunday afternoon, and I'm not the one who listened to it. My partner, Chris Weitz, listened to it, and he sent an email to everyone in our company and said, this is a movie, absolutely. And before we had a chance to reply to the email, he had already tweeted at Lulu, who he didn't know was a filmmaker, because that's not apparent on the show, and said, I'd like to help turn your episode into a film. And 48 hours later, it was ours. And it was being chased certainly very quickly by a lot of people. And concurrently, it turned out that a company called Big Beach who has made many independent films and supported the industry greatly and made a movie called Little Miss Sunshine. They were chasing concurrently, and after we sort of locked it up, we got a call going, would you be interested in partnering with them? And Big Beach, in addition to being great producers, are also financiers. So that meant that within 3 weeks of sort of getting the rights, we already had the money to make the movie. So it was, it was a little bit of kismet. And our movie obviously cost sizably less than most of the movies up here. But yeah, I mean, it happened magically quick.
Were you happy that Chris sent out that tweet publicly, or?
Well, here's the thing. He didn't, it's a funny thing about Twitter, which I am not on. So he didn't send it publicly. He DM'd her.
Oh, okay.
And it's the funny thing is he's been desperate to quit Twitter. But he can't because that's the second film that we've gotten via Twitter. We made a small film that unfortunately very few people have seen, but it's a lovely movie and has launched the career of a terrific filmmaker, but a movie called Columbus by a writer-director named Kogonada. And he had been on a list, thank you, he had been on a list of, in Filmmaker magazine of 25 filmmakers to watch, and Chris DM'd him after watching his sort of supercuts. He was known for making supercuts or sort of short films for Criterion and the BFI. And Chris said, if you ever want to make a movie, let's do it. And next thing you knew, we were making an Ozu-inspired movie in Columbus, Indiana. So he's not allowed to quit Twitter, as it's been a magical way for us to find ideas.
Yeah, I would think he's going to stay on there. You have an open account though. You're going to let him do that.
Instagram is enough stress for an adult to handle. I don't have. He's not on Instagram, so I've got that covered.
All right. You split the duties.
Yes.
Yeah. So what was the biggest, you probably, how soon did you go to China and start scouting for locations and thinking about developing partnerships there and getting this thing going?
I want to say it took about a year of developing the script and just sort of doing that in a very sort of specific, not a lot of voices. There were enough producers working on it with Lulu, but I want to say about a year and a half, Lulu and Danny Melia from Big Beach and I all went to China, and first off had the time of our lives because we did work in a day and a half of sightseeing, and you can do a lot of that. But we went and we were at the time looking for a Chinese partner in addition to scouting, and what was interesting is it was very difficult because the movie, while 80% in Chinese, if you have not had the pleasure of seeing it yet, is a very American film. So, to be honest, everybody said no. We were not able to find a Chinese partner at that point. But the script was in the shape where we knew we were ready to make it, and we knew we were going to sort of be able to make it for a price. And we ended up going to the hometown where Lulu's grandmother's actually from, and we went to all the locations where the story had really happened. And we didn't decide at that point that we were going to shoot there, but we both fell in love with the city. And we had a note as we were developing the script. There's a lot of dinner scenes in the movie, and I remember us sort of producerially talking about these people sure do eat a lot. And when we were in Chongqing with Lulu's family, all we did was eat. So that stays in the script, and it worked very well. But look, once we had gone and we scouted and we did find a Chinese line producer, it moved pretty quickly. Casting was sort of the next stage, but. The hardest thing about making a movie in China is that I don't speak Chinese, and nor does Danny, and you had to put certain things in place to obviously handle that because there was a good amount of the crew that didn't. But in the end, they make a movie like we make a movie. So it was a rather smooth process. We had a car once that was in the way in a shot, and the crew just moved it. They picked it up. We don't do that in America. Or Lulu said, I think that tree's in the way. I might want to move the shot, and then it was cut down. We don't do that in America either. But overall, it was a very, very similar process.
Now, Emma, you can't even do that in New York, can you?
Maybe she can. Maybe she can.
I have uprooted trees and put them back.
Okay.
I have.
David, This is your first movie with Quentin Tarantino. I mean, you hear the story with Tarantino movies, it's like, okay, he's written his script, he's come down from the mountain, and he's got the tablets, and he invites people over to read. And I always hear these stories and such. But so that's your intro into this. But what if? And he puts you in a room. What if you don't like it? Maybe. And there's a pretty. Tarantino has a good track record, but I don't know. Maybe there's been 10 times that we don't know about that Tarantino's invited people over to his house, and people are just like, yeah, you should just keep that in the drawer.
I don't know of those times.
Yeah.
Is
it stressful?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was asked first to get involved with Hateful Eight, but I was busy at the time. And then I got a call about this from Mike Simpson, his agent, and I knew I wasn't going to be asked a third time. And the opportunity to work with Quentin Tarantino is something that is pretty great. I felt incredibly lucky to be asked, and so I flew out to Los Angeles, and I arrived, and got off the plane and went straight to his house. And walked in, and he sat down, gave me a cup of coffee, which I needed, and it was that in itself was already pretty nerve-wracking because I'd never met him. Mm-hmm. So he gave me the script, put me in the back of his house in a little room, and said, "Read it, and I'll be back in a few hours." Now it's a long script, it's.
It was probably longer than what we see in the film, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And just as an aside, Quentin is an artist who is always creating. He's writing a book now. On set, he's writing. He's voracious. So not only is there a lot more in the script that I read, that he was writing as he went, and there's still more that was in the film, or there was an initial cut that isn't in the final film that some people have seen. So I was reading it in the back, and it's scary because you've got to come and talk about it afterwards. You're not just saying, "Yeah, I like it." You've actually got to pay attention and actually have some things to say.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure. He's a glorious writer. He conjures the film so vividly in your mind as you're reading it. He writes for the reader. He really does enjoy he enjoys screenwriting and the art of screenwriting, not just dialogue or a line here for description, which he knows because he's going to direct it. He really fills it out, and there's a really distinct voice to his prose, not just his dialogue. But after around two and a bit hours, he comes in, and by that point, I'm reading the third act, the epilogue, as he called it, and it's pretty gripping. And he comes in and he says, "Hey, how's it going?"
Nice.
And I say, "Go away," because I'm so immersed in it. "Get out!" And I think that's how I got the job. But,
he respected your passion. Yes.
So he left. I finished. I went out, and then we talked a little bit. I went off, had a semi-good night's jet-lagged sleep, and then went back and read it again the next day, and then we talked for a few hours properly about it. There was a meeting. It was great. He's such a. I think people don't really understand Quentin. I think he really is a sweetheart. There is beneath that veneer, you know, which some people go, oh, is actually someone with a big beating heart. And he was gracious and kind and open, and I mean, no question, he has his ideas and he sticks to them, but he really was open to the conversations that we had, and it was a gift.
Mm. Yeah, it's funny when you say that he's always writing, or he's still, you know, I just spoke with him and Brad Pitt and DiCaprio Friday, and I asked DiCaprio and Pitt, well, so where do you see your characters in 10 years? And Pitt was like, oh, he knows where those guys are, you know, and he never stopped writing the movie. He kept writing the movie into, and Tarantino told me, like, Rick Dalton's last credit.
Yeah.
You know, it's, I mean, he knows that far in advance.
He knows that far in advance, and he also knows that far back.
Yes.
You know,
yeah.
This is his world. You know, this is a movie that is about, that really is informed by him growing up in Los Angeles in 1969. It's filled with his passions and his loves and his cares and his memories, and that passion for movies. I mean, there are very few people who love movies as much as Quentin. He has a cinema, you know, he's programming films and TV, you know, and music. And I think that passion infuses every frame. So he knows that world, and he is continuing to build out the world of Once Upon a Time as we sit here now. He's probably at home writing.
Well, he said that out of all the reviews, out of all the lines in reviews, his favorite line in a review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was Brad Pitt driving down Hollywood Boulevard was like Brad Pitt driving through a documentary.
Yeah.
And that was part of your job, was to make sure that you could turn Hollywood Boulevard back 40 years.
Yeah.
No, wait,
I mean,
50. I'm sorry. That's why I'm why I'm a writer and not a mathematician. But yeah, turn back.
By the way, I'm not a mathematician either. So fortunately, yes, absolutely. You know, the film is filled with details from his childhood. If you look at a lot of the driving shots, they're from low down looking up. And that's because that's Quentin's child eye view of Los Angeles at the time. A lot of shots looking up at the actor with, you know, when Brad Pitt is driving home to his trailer, low shots. He was sitting, Quentin, you'd often sit in the back of the car, but looking up at the signs as he was heading back. But yeah, Hollywood Boulevard is a character in the film, and most certainly getting that converted was one of the biggest challenges of the production. You know, we had, by the way, it's not my, you know, I'm part of it, but really George Kakandis, who was our brilliant executive producer, production manager, line producer, so much, you know, she was part of everything, was really at the heart of that. And our brilliant production designer, set decorator, and obviously location department. Yeah, you know, as you can imagine, getting permission, filming on Hollywood Boulevard is not exactly easy. Filming in Hollywood Boulevard in the summer at the height of tourist season is even more of a challenge. You know, shutting down a main thoroughfare is not something that every city wants. So there was a lot of persuasion and negotiation by our production department, and then, but we still hadn't got the final okay, and here we were not that far from starting production, and we didn't have permission. Producer's nightmare. So we decided, you know, Quentin said, I'll go down and I'll make a plea. But, you know, Quentin likes to make an entrance, and we thought that would be effective. He would, so we went down and met with the city of Hollywood, and the location department decided they'd do the presentation and then bring out Quentin at the end. But there was a lot of discussion. That presentation took a little longer than we thought. And Quentin, who wanted to make his entrance a surprise, was stuck in a broom closet for around an hour. And then he made his entrance. And, he's incredibly persuasive. His passion is undeniable. The personal nature of this was very clear, and fortunately they said yes.
When you're talking about him having so many ideas, and he's still working, still writing, always writing, is part of your job as a producer just to make sure that he kind of rein him in a little bit, or is he pretty good about sort of doing that himself?
No, he actually is pretty good. He said to me at the beginning, both, this is a hugely important film to me. I'm going to go to the end of the world to make it as good as it can be, but at the same time, I want to be responsible. So Hollywood Boulevard, for example, we began with 8 blocks, it then became 6, and it became 4. So, yeah, part of my role was to have those conversations with him, and sometimes he'd say yes, and sometimes he'd say no. But he's a producer on the film, and he's a producer for a myriad of reasons, but one of those reasons is that he really does understand the sort of fiscal responsibility of making a film, and how lucky we're all lucky to be doing what we're doing. And if you think about it, to make a piece of art or entertainment for whether it be 500,000 to 100 and blah blah million, whatever it may be, and in between 200 million some films, that's an inordinate amount of money. It's bonkers. And so, I think it is important that there is a responsibility, no matter what size, because it's insane the amount of money we get. Even though no matter whether you're making, and I've made a $60,000 film and I've made films that cost over 200, it's never enough. No matter what, it's never enough. Or it never feels like it's enough, but it is.
Yeah. Well, Marriage Story, lower budget, not as, but still a lot of, obviously a lot of challenges. There are locations, and you're dealing again with another filmmaker who has a very, very specific, a lot of ideas, and Noah Baumbach, and writer-director like Tarantino. So, what is there a comparison in their approaches to filmmaking? Are they similar?
Well, they're similar in some ways and different in others. The good news for me is that they admire each other a lot. That makes my job a little bit easier if you're working on both. Neither of them allow mobile phones on set, which, for producers in the room, I can't recommend highly enough, because it means you're either working. When you're on set, you're either working or you're building a relationship with your peers. And I think that is so important in this process. And when you're constantly looking down at your phone, or people are in between takes or whatever, it doesn't encourage that sense of community, which I think is one of the great joys and pleasures, and frankly makes for better work.
Had you ever worked with a filmmaker before who had that rule?
No, but I'm most certainly, that's sort of something I'm going to try and get more filmmakers I work with to use. Both Quentin and Noah are wordsmiths. Noah's script long too, but is very much sparer. Less description, but clear, but much sparer. With Noah, for all of us, no matter who the director is, you adapt. You have to adapt to the person you're working with. For Noah, with both these directors, my first films worked with them, so there was a lot of learning. With Noah, at the end of week 1, we were 3 days behind. I was panicking. Panicking may be too strong, but I was most certainly uncomfortable. But by the end of week 2, we were back on schedule, and Noah does a lot of takes. Sometimes 20, 30. Quentin doesn't do quite so many takes. He does when he needs to, but he doesn't do as many as Noah. But Noah is, like Quentin, responsible and understands that the shoot was a 50-day shoot. We ended up 50 days. They're both perfectionists. They're relentless in their pursuit of their vision. And I think the big difference is Noah's set is a little quieter and a little more intimate because he feels like he needs the safe space, the quiet space to get the actors to the intimate place that they get to. Quentin is is a showman, and I think his sets are very alive and filled with energy, and he's constantly regaling crew and everyone with his stories of film, and it's a gift. Going back to Quentin, KHJ, which is a character in the movie, the radio station.
Boss Radio.
Boss Radio. We literally, that was playing in the production office all the time. We'd go on location scouts, that was playing. And sometimes we'd be driving along, looking, and it would say, it's sunny and 75 degrees in Los Angeles. And we'd say, but one second, it's 95 degrees. Anyway, so it's just that. So there's that sense of celebration of movie making. Noah's is a quieter process.
Amy Pascal is going to be here today for Little Women. She's sick. I don't know if you can see the cough drops up here, everybody. It's that time of year. So let's talk about her movie Behind Her Back. No, let's talk about. There was a lot written about. It's been a very strong year for movies made by women. Very strong year for movies made about women, and there was a lot written when we go through award season and not that many women were recognized. Not many of those films were recognized. 5 women in the history of 92 years of Oscars, 5 women have been nominated for director. We're all, great slate of directors nominated this year, represented by films we're talking about today. But are you guys, what are your thoughts on this? Because that was a real thing of this season. Are you optimistic that women are going to continue maybe getting better opportunities and a little bit more recognition? Or is this just like the Academy and this is how it is?
I do think things are changing, actually. Back home I chair BAFTA, so I'm slightly conflicted, and obviously BAFTA came out first with its all-male shortlist and got a lot of stick for it. But what kind of got lost in the mix was actually there were 13 female directors nominated for BAFTAs this year. Now, they're not nominated in the main fiction category, but they're nominated for docs, they're nominated for debut, they're nominated for shorts, and those women are the future of the industry, and they are coming down the track. So I sort of feel conflicted because I think it isn't right. It isn't as good as it should be in terms of diversity across the board. But I do think the future is looking much brighter, and I think it's a shame that. So, for instance, I can speak to the BAFTAs, and somebody else probably better to speak about the Oscars, but the 2 people most nominated for BAFTAs were Bong this year and Wad, who directed, female Syrian director who directed For Sama, which, if you haven't seen, is the most extraordinary documentary. So they are the 2 personally most nominated people. Neither of them are white men, last time I had a look at them. So, it's a complicated picture, and I think it's not just about who are in these academies, who are voting. It's about which pictures do the studios and the financiers think are viable for awards, and therefore they put spend behind those films, because people have a limited time span. They don't watch 200 movies. They don't even watch 50 movies, probably, some of them. So they watch the ones that they think they need to watch, and that gets dictated by and large by the loud noises that the studios make. So I think it's like everyone needs to just pull together, really, and make the industry the diverse place it should be, and make the films that we all make, the diverse mix that they should be.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't say it better than Pippa just said it, so I'm not even going to try. But I am extremely optimistic. I really am, and I think that there are brilliant female voices out there, and I'm excited to champion and support and do whatever I can to help that increase. But there are a lot of producers and a lot of craftswomen recognized this year, and that's great. So there are a lot of great women working in film being recognized too.
I think working with Taika, who's an Indigenous filmmaker, he's a Māori from New Zealand, and it's not the female discussion, but it's definitely, I feel like there's a sense that in our world that we're operating in, the people that we know who are also Indigenous, also female. We support a lot of female directors from New Zealand. There's definitely feels as though there's more opportunities for people who haven't had those opportunities earlier. So that, I agree that it feels really exciting as a white man, and amongst all those people, I'm really excited to see them getting more opportunities. So I also feel like we're going in the right direction. The who's voting for these, the numbers of the people in the various guilds and academies, maybe is having an impact. I know there's also the discussion about reviewers. How many female and Indigenous or very diverse reviewers. The whole industry, I think, trying to stimulate that in festivals as well, I think is a big part of creating that change. So it has to come from everywhere, which is, I think, what you're saying, Pippa.
Is producing a more welcoming field for women? Every year on this panel, it seems to be pretty evenly split on gender. Do you feel like this is a field that is more welcoming for women in the industry?
Yeah, I do actually. I think historically there've always been female studio execs, maybe not top bosses. There are only a couple at the moment who are women, but certainly development people, production, heads of production, producers. And I think it's a complicated thing. I make a show back in the UK called Call the Midwife, which is thank you. Which is, all the cast are women, the whole production team is female. Over the years, we've pretty much only used female directors and writers, and I've talked to people about some of our directors, and the words that they use to describe them. I've heard she's very stubborn, she's really tricky. Oh, no, I don't think I'd want to work with her. And yet when they talk about male directors, they always say, oh, he's very single-minded, he's very determined, and somehow...
I think I just used those adjectives.
I think that's a big kind of cultural problem that behavior that in men is seen as admirable and wholly supportable, in women is seen as them being tricky and bloody-minded, and they should be much more nurturing and malleable. That's a word I hear quite a lot. So I think it's complicated. It's not just about giving people first chances, because actually when kids come out of drama school, in the UK it's a roughly 50-50 gender split for directors, but by the time you get to sort of second features, most of the female directors have dropped away, and certainly on UK TV I know it's about 92% is directed by men in prime time. So it's a really bad picture, given that the students do come out. It's to do with supporting them and making them feel that directing is a viable career for you to carry on right through your life.
Yeah. Okay, so actors get all the glory. Directors get all the credit. What's in it for you guys? What do producers get?
Who's going to take that one on?
A lot of stress.
It's interesting doing the panels with other producers because I feel a sense of camaraderie because you're often, as a producer, you're sort of working in your team and you don't talk to a lot of other producers. And so hearing stories of other productions and the joys and the triumphs and the worries, it's quite. I've felt quite camaraderie being part of that process. But I think the time, I feel like it's really important. I'm really protective of Taika. That's a big part of the job, and seeing him sort of trying to rise get his vision to where he wants it to be. That's very rewarding. And also, I think David was saying about the camaraderie of when you're together with a team. When all of the parts add up to more than their individual value. And there's a sort of alchemy that comes together that it's like magic. It's like you can't control it, but you can sort of try to create an environment where that can happen. And when it does, that's a pretty rewarding part of the process. And so I think that's what I'm in it for.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I completely agree, Carthew. Also, what's in it? I'm not interested in being in front of the camera. I'm not interested in being a director. I don't want glory. I love making movies. I feel so lucky to be able to do that and to support incredible talent to realize their vision. That is a gift. Mm-hmm. It's a gift to work in this industry. It's a gift to do what we do. Making movies is what I want to do. And being a part of that family that makes movies, being able to support incredible talent in realizing their vision, that's what's in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can say.
So the camaraderie, the realizing the vision, the love of movies, what else do you love about producing? What else?
It's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we do is fun, and it is exceptionally hard as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've heard the stories from the digging of the trenches or the moving of the trees, but I mean, it is an exceptionally fun thing to do. It's what Carthew and David just said. It's the satisfaction of supporting the film or the filmmaker or the crew and seeing that, like seeing The Farewell at Sundance with 1,300 people when it had only ever screened for 10 people. Like, that was an incredibly satisfying moment. People laughed at times when you didn't expect them to, and they cried at other moments. And I think that is the reward of it. What David said, I mean, I don't know how to do anything else. Like, this is it.
I'm uniquely unqualified to do anything.
Like, I have no other skills.
Me neither. To echo David, I'm behind the. Is this working? I'm behind the camera for a reason. Everybody, all directors come with their own challenges, but to get through 108 grueling days of shooting, working with new technology, with an incredibly high budget, the responsibility that comes along with that, and then a year of post to see if all of that came together. When I saw Irishman, for the first time, start to finish with all the effects and all of the years and the everything that went into that film, it is incredibly gratifying, and I was so proud, and just to sort of sit back and pat myself on the back, and I know David probably feels the same way, but working with a Marty or a Quentin to accomplish that is no small feat.
Also, Also, no 2 days are the same.
Right.
It's every day is something new, a new challenge, and I'm learning every day.
Every day.
How great is that?
Yeah.
I think also, of course, you hear stories of, people seeing movies that changed their lives, or seeing movies that gave them hope, or that made them feel more connected in the world. And coming from a small country and living in a small town, the movies were your sort of window into other worlds, and feeling connected and feeling how movies can change people and make them think. I'm sure everyone here agrees that is also a big part of the satisfaction.
여기 다른 분들이 말씀하신 게 다 구구절절 너무 동의가 되고.
I really agree with what everyone has been saying at this panel.
네, 하나 덧붙이자면 이 영화라는 그 꿈으로 모여 있는 아티스트들이 그러니까 관객과 만나고 자본 관객 이런 관계에서 그 불화를 일으키지 않고 행복한 조인을 할 수 있게 하는 게 또 프로듀서만이 할 수 있는 역할이라 그분의 고유한 나의 그 해결에 대해서 그러니까 되게 뿌듯함을 느낀다고.
But to add a little bit, when the dream of movie making comes together with the filmmakers and the audience, I am so proud to be a part of that as the producer in that ride.
I also think I've unfortunately had movies that haven't worked or that have failed. But what's interesting is you have to weigh that with the whole experience of making the movie. It's sort of what Emma just talked about, because certainly not all of us up here have had movies that haven't connected, because it's terrific up here. But you can't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe. I just mean you can't let the failure of a movie change the experience of making it. You can Monday morning quarterback, you can go back and you can think about what we could have done differently, but I think that it has to be weighed through the experience of making the whole film, because when you put it out on a weekend and no one comes to see it, it could be very depressing, and that's not the life that we've chosen to live, certainly, so you have to weigh it through the lens of the experience.
So you talk about, we mentioned movies can change your life. Movies can have that kind of impact. Top of your head, what's the movie that changed your life or got you here? I love your expression, Heyman. Don't ask me that. Too many. Well, okay, top of your head. What's the movie? Young man.
Well, I think of there are. Gosh, so many, but
yeah.
This is going to sound incredibly projected, but A Ballad of Narayama by Shohei Imamura was a really significant film for me, because it worked on, he's a master filmmaker, but also it was, I don't know how many of you have seen the film, but it's about a woman growing up in Japan. Sorry, it's about a small village in Japan where when you reach the age of 70, it is perceived that your life is no longer. It costs more to live. The value of your life is no longer commensurate with the amount what you're consuming. So your value to the village is not worth it, as it were. And these people, when they turn 70, take a pilgrimage to the mountain of Narayama and die. Sit in a lotus position and die. And the film was funny and moving and affecting and beautiful, and it worked as a narrative, just a moving tale, but it was also a political film about the rigidity of society and the challenge within Japan at the time of individuality and of breaking with tradition. And the idea of how a film can, not unlike some of the films here, which films that work on one level as a narrative, but also have a metaphoric and greater sort of meaning, that was really exciting to me. So a film like that, or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which work on various planes. So, of course, there are many, many, many more, but you asked for something that was on the top of my head, and there it was.
Anyone else want to
help?
Too many.
I feel like if I follow that up with Ferris Bueller's Day Off, it's not.
Exactly.
But admittedly, the John Hughes movies, for me, were very influential.
Totally.
I'd be lying if I said otherwise. But so was Amadeus by Milos Forman. I mean, as David said, there's so many.
Yeah.
I always feel like I'm supposed to say The Godfather because I love The Godfather. But yeah, I mean, I think it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
I got Mike Nichols' Silkwood.
Yeah. Nice.
I've got Harold and Maude, which it's it was my Parasite growing up. I just thought it was extraordinary. I couldn't understand how you could have a film that made you cry with laughter and then cry and that took you into this strange world. I absolutely loved that film. And recently, I'm going to get the name wrong now, but a documentary called Honeyland. I don't know if you've seen that. Oh, I was completely blown away by that. I thought it was an amazing piece of work. So all the time, new things.
Yeah.
저 같은 경우는 특정 한 편이라기보다 어릴 때 그 극장에서 개봉하는 영화를 그냥 하나씩 보던 시절에서 25살 때쯤에 3달 동안 200편의 그 클래식 영화들을 본 적이 있어요.
Rather than talk about one film, I remember being a kid and anticipating going to the theater to see the next upcoming film. I remember when I was 25, within the course of 3 months, I saw 200 film classics.
그때 그 영화들은 세계 영화사에서 가치를 인정받았고 영화를 하는 사람이라면 누구나 봐야 된다고 하는 그러니까 정말 클래식 고전 영화들로만 거의 200편을 본 거였는데요. 그 시기부터 제 인생이 바뀌었기 때문에 그 클래식 영화들을 통째로 제 인생 영화라고 말할 수 있을 것 같습니다.
Those 200 films are, pivotal films in film history from all around the world. And after I saw those 200 films, my life changed. So if I were to say what film changed my life, it would be those 200 that I saw within those 3 months.
그리고 그때 제가 그 영화들을 봤을 때 아카데미 작품상 혹은 칸느 황금종려상 이런 타이틀들이 있었는데요. 저희 패러사이트가 그런 타이틀들을 같이 갖게 되면서 제가 그렇게 제 인생을 바꿨던 그런 어떤 레벨의 그런 훌륭한 나중에 클래식이 될 영화를 제작했구나라는 생각에 되게 감격스러웠습니다.
Those films from the 200 collection were, nominated for Oscars, nominated for the Palme d'Or, and the fact that a film that I worked on, that I produced, have won or has been nominated for those awards, it makes me feel like, oh, maybe I am at that level now, and hopefully Parasite will become a film classic as well.
Absolutely.
I wish I'd got in before that, because that would have been a good end. City of the Lost Children, I think, is who's by the director who did Amelie, which you probably definitely all saw. But I think it was the sort of the oddness of the world and the characters and the heart, the warmth, and also the being taken somewhere emotionally, just the world, the world being taken into that world and being completely immersed. That's what I remember. One of the first films that really inspired me.
Okay, final question. The festival brings in a number of students every year. If there are any aspiring producers in the audience today, what advice would you give them?
Just start making things. Yeah, just start making things. I think that's, it's easier now to make things with, from a phone to a camera. You can get a cheap camera and just get race fit. You just every time you keep making something, you meet collaborators and you sort of, that's where the relationships begin often. A lot of these relationships with the directors today on this panel have been for a long period of time, and so just start making things with different people and see who you really jive with. I think that's, how to start.
I would say bring a sense of humanity to the work and lead with compassion and be kind and put your cell phones away and really become a part of your community. This is aside from getting out there and doing it and finding projects, but when you get there, lead with compassion and kindness.
Any other words of wisdom before that you want to send the audience out with here?
저 같은 경우는 프로듀서가 되려고 해서 프로듀서가 된 건 아니고 영화를 좋아하면서 각 파트들을 그러니까 운명이 오는 대로 맞닥뜨리다 보니 지금 프로듀서가 된 케이스인데요. 아마 프로듀서가 되고 싶은 혹은 지금 영화를 공부하는 학생들이라면 그냥 그 좋아하는 마음에 집중해서 그 열정을 가지고 오는 고통들을 이겨낼 수 있으면 그게 꼭 프로듀서가 뭐건 간에 행복한 영화와 행복한 직업을 이렇게 매칭할 수 있지 않을까 그렇게 생각이 듭니다.
So I didn't become a producer because I meant to become a producer. I actually played a lot of different roles before I landed this job. However, for students who are aspiring to be producers, I want them to really focus on their love of cinema. And that is the power that will propel them through hardships, through difficult times. And as long as they still have that love, they'll be fine.
You want to go?
Go.
I think what Carthew said is true. The barrier to entry has never been easier. So if you're going to be making things and working on different things, learn a little bit about every job so that you understand what that is. Because as you rise up through and you're successful, it's important to sort of understand what everybody does and to be respectful of that. Something that I learned from the Weitz brothers, who I've been fortunate enough to be working with for 20 years, is no matter how big our crew is, we try to know every single name of every single crew member, because again, it is a hard job. So I've never gripped and I've never gaffed, but I tried early on to really understand and learn what those jobs are. But it goes to what Emma said too about even compassion and kindness on set, because people are there to work hard to create this thing. So I think understanding that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Going down the line. A few things. I echo what's been said about compassion and kindness, because no matter who you are within the crew, you're a vital cog in that wheel. So just because you're fortunate enough to be head of department or producer doesn't mean that your value is any greater. So I think that's one thing that's really important. I think watch a lot of films, know that there's a cinema before 1980, and watch those films. I think that's really important. Follow your heart, a bit corny but true, and dare to fail. You know, I think that it's really, failure's not a bad thing. You learn more often through failure than you do through success. And the other thing is don't follow, because with all these, I think it just be brave and dare to be different.
You want to send us out? Producers Guild winner,
Well,
Peachy?
I think one thing I was bad at when I was starting out was not admitting what I didn't know, and I think there's no harm in saying you don't know something or you don't understand something, and I think when you're, particularly as a producer, young producer, you sort of feel like you're meant to understand absolutely everything and bullshit your way through, and nobody's going to laugh at you when you say you don't really understand what that lens is or some bit of equipment. So I think just be prepared to fess up when you don't understand or you don't know something, and because that's the way that you learn stuff. And I think what David said is right. Just follow your heart. Follow the films. All these films that people have made here. They're all kind of passion projects, and they're all strange. They're a strange, idiosyncratic bunch of films. And I think that's what audiences respond to. They respond to that passion, and they go and they want to seek those films out. And at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do is get audiences to our movies. So go after your own taste and your own heart, and you'll be fine.
Thank you so much. The PGA Awards ended, as I mentioned earlier, like 12 hours before this panel started. Thank you for making the drive to Santa Barbara. Thank you for your work this year. Thank you for these movies.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for coming.